Thank you for joining me as we learn about PBIS in the Fullerton School District during the 2017-2018 school year. Hi, my name is Helene Morris, and I'm the Director of Administrative Services for Fullerton School District. Please follow me on Twitter at MorrisHelene. Let's give a little overview about what PBIS is. Now, as we know, children do not come with an instruction manual, and that's where PBIS comes into play. PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports. It's not a curriculum. Instead, it's an approach or a framework. PBIS provides positive strategies for defining, teaching, and supporting appropriate behaviors. And it's a continuum of positive behavior support for all students. And it's inclusive of all settings, such as the hallway, the NPR, restrooms, lunch tables, classrooms, etc. Some components of PBIS are that we teach our expectations to students and lead by example. We reinforce those desired behaviors. If a student doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a student doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a student doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a student doesn't know how to behave, do we punish or do we teach? Well, we believe that we teach through modeling, role play, teaching, reteaching, and practicing. We teach our students exactly what these expectations look like in classrooms and in common areas. Now, PBIS is a multi-tiered behavioral framework. Now, most of our students are going to fall in that green area, which is the universal Tier 1, and that's our prevention. That's school-wide, classroom-wide. That's what we do for all of our students, all of our staff, in all of our settings. Tier 2, the yellow area, is a little bit more targeted. Those are systems for students that need a little additional support beyond the universal or Tier 1 system. And then finally, we have our individualized or intensive system in the red, which is our students that require more support, maybe in the academic, social, or mental health services. Now, one of the important things of PBIS is for schools to identify their core values and to clearly define their expectations for their students. So core values could be something such as be safe, be responsible, be respectful, and be ready to learn. Now, if we're teaching these behaviors, the next question is, what does it look like? What does it look like to be respectful, to be responsible, to be ready, and to be safe? Well, we define what that looks like in various areas on a campus. It could be in the playground, the classroom, in the multi-purpose room, in the bathroom, in the hallway, in the lunch tables. And those behaviors are explicitly taught to students. Our schools do kickoffs during the first week of school where students are year in and year out explicitly taught and reminded of those behaviors and those expectations. And the expectations are posted throughout the campus so that students have an idea of what they are and those constant reminders. And then the behaviors are enforced with students because students earn incentives such as tickets, or there's an online app that students can, and some of the sites are using, such as PBIS Rewards, where students are rewarded for making those good choices and supporting those core school values through their behavior. And then with the incentives, this is one school's paw wall, and all of those little paws, each one has an individual student's name, and those students have leveled up for doing their job and showing that they know how to make good choices. And then PBIS also includes some really fun events, assemblies, raffles, videos, fun days to support student learning. Now, when our students need more intensive supports and maybe need a referral to the office, we define what is a major office discipline referral and what's a minor office discipline referral. We also look at how can our teachers support our students in their learning, what restorative practices can they use, and then what best practices can our administrators use. It's also really important for us to have that connection to home life and to involve our parents and families and extend PBIS practices and common language from the school site to the home. So we might teach our parents just to use positive wording. So for example, instead of telling a kid don't run, we state the targeted behavior, which is walk. Or instead of saying no hitting, we say, okay, hands to self. Instead of stop jumping around, maybe keep your body calm. So reinforcing that at home and at school really helps our students to have a well-balanced approach. Now let's get a little more specific about where our schools are at with their PBIS implementation. So most of our schools, as you'll see here, are in sustainability. That means they've gone through Tier 1 training, Tier 2 training, Tier 3 training, and are finally sustaining their PBIS programs. A few of our schools started a little bit later in their PBIS journey. So our Tier 2 schools right now are Acacia, Laguna Road, and Nicholas Junior High. And in the Tier 3 cadre, we have Beechwood School. And then as you can see here, all the rest of our schools are in sustainability. Now, depending on what tier you're at, we partner with the Orange County Department of Ed, and we have a contract with them, and they provide training at the different tiers. So Tier 1 trainings, Tier 2 trainings, Tier 3 trainings, and finally sustainability trainings. So the Cadre 2 trainings for OCDE are attended by teams, the PBIS teams at Acacia, Laguna Road, and Nicholas. And this is kind of a chart showing the offerings of the Orange County Department of Ed. And then our Cadre 3 or Tier 2 school, which is Beechwood, they attend those trainings at OCDE. Then that leaves us with all of our other schools, the other 16 schools, which are sustainability schools. Now, our sustainability schools attend in-house training, and we have some trainings coming up on December 12th, February 6th, and May 15th. OCDE also offers sustainability training, and we're able to send small teams to those trainings as well to further get new ideas about how we can keep our practices fresh. So what's our vision for PBIS for the 2017-18 school year? What are we really hoping to accomplish as a district? Well, we have 4 focal areas that we've defined. The first is universal behavior screening. So using the student risk screening scale for internalizing and externalizing behaviors. And we'll go into what that looks like a little bit later. The second focal area is discovering the level of PBIS implementation at each school site using the tiered fidelity inventory. The third focal area is data-driven PBIS, learning how to use the School-Wide Information System, or SWIS, to improve behavior support at each site by providing staff with accurate, timely, and practical information for making decisions about the school environment and climate. And finally, our fourth focal area is learning how to use restorative justice and restorative practices to improve student behavior. So let's look at our first focal area, the Student Risk Screening Scale, the SRSSIE. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the why. Why are we doing universal screening for our students? Why is that one of our priorities this year? Well, it begins by looking at our local control accountability plan and our LCAP. So our goal number 3 says all district departments and school sites will provide a safe and secure environment for all staff and students. And then if we look within that goal, Action 4 highlights counseling support as one of those focal areas. And this year we budgeted an additional $200,000 to support mental health. So we're talking about the power of universal screening data. Universal screening data provides support for continued LCAP funding for mental health resources. The data also supports an overall approach to MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support. MTSS is basically where PBIS meets RTI, or response to intervention. Now, when we're talking about behavioral screening, it's really a paradigm shift. Now, we use universal screening to help determine the academic interventions our students need. Why wouldn't we do the same to identify the students needing greater behavioral or social emotional support? And that's what we're hoping to accomplish with our students. So our schools have mental health resources and support. For example, our schools have a PBIS team that analyzes data and develops behavior support plans. They have the roundtable and SIT meeting process. Many of our Title I schools have a social services assistant. And at all of our sites, we have mental health therapists for our special ed and general ed students. Through the St. Jude grant, we have a Master of Social Work, or an MSW intern, at 4 of our Title I schools. In the Department of Child Welfare and Attendance, we also have a social services assistant who is funded through the St. Jude grant. And I'd like to introduce her to you. Her name is Elizabeth Alva. And again, she is the Social Services Assistant in the Child Welfare and Attendance Department. And she works with families to provide referrals to outside counseling resources. So we might have one of our mental health interns contact Elizabeth so she can connect that family to more intensive or just outside resources that the family might need. Again, she's funded through the St. Jude grant, and we have her email there, elizabeth_alva@myfsd.org. And that's all part of our student risk screening scale. So when we're screening students, we're using a research-based screener, and it's called the SRSSIE. And it screens for 7 externalizing behaviors and 5 internalizing behaviors. Now, we're not saying that students always display these behaviors. It's just how often does the teacher observe a student displaying these behaviors. So teachers use a rating scale for the screener. It's a Likert type scale where they say 0, they never see it, 1 occasionally, 2 sometimes, 3 frequently. And then that data is input into Illuminate, which is a system we already have in place. And we use cut points. So green means a student would be at low risk, yellow would be at moderate risk, and red would be at high risk. Again, the SRSSIE is a research-based tool. There's a variety of resources available. One of the videos I'd like to highlight that can just be found by searching YouTube is by Kathleen Lane, professor of Kansas University's Department of Education. It's a 16-minute video, and it goes into great detail. Now, we've provided all of our administrators and teachers with directions for how to administer this type of behavior screener and what to do with the data, including our screening windows, and they also have access to an Illuminate screencast. So again, that's one of our focal areas for this year, is using the SRSSIE behavior screener. Our next focal area is the tiered fidelity inventory. So you might be wondering, what is it? Who would use it? Why would we want to use it? And how do we access it? So what it is it's basically a way for school PBIS teams to determine where they're at in their PBIS implementation. Just because a school is in sustainability doesn't mean that they have PBIS fully implemented to every single level. So it's a way for them to assess where are they at and what are the gaps. And so it would be used by school site PBIS teams, and they would want to use it so they could improve their school-wide PBIS. And how do they access it? We access it through pbisapps.org. And our schools have been provided with some training on how to use this, and in our next sustainability training, we'll be going into deeper focus with the tiered fidelity inventory. Our third focal area for this year is using Swiss. Now, one of the things our PBIS teams do is they meet. It might be a couple times a month, it might be once a month, but they look at the Swiss data. Now, Swiss is a school-wide information system, and the office discipline referrals are logged into Swiss. And Swiss provides some really powerful data for decision making. For example, a PBIS team might notice that at 12 o'clock every day, 4th graders are getting a large amount of office discipline referrals. Why is that happening? Well, it could be that maybe the supervisor is walking the 2nd graders out somewhere and there isn't enough supervision for the 4th graders. Or it could be a deeper issue. So that data is used to see who's getting referred to the office. What time of day is it happening? Are certain teachers writing referrals and certain teachers maybe not utilizing that system? So it gives data so that the school can make decisions for improving their PBIS practice. And one of the great resources we always love to share with our staff is PBIS World. So when we're noticing our students who need behavior support plans, this is a great resource for putting that into effect. Our fourth and final focal area for the 2017-18 school year is implementing restorative justice and restorative practices. We have had a great partnership with PBIS with Ginger Frady, who's the assistant principal at Rolling Hills School. And she's provided our PBIS teams throughout the district with some great trainings on restorative practices. Now, if you're wondering what restorative practices are, restorative practices in schools are inspired by the philosophy and practices of restorative justice, which puts repairing harm done to relationships and people over and above the need for assigning blame and dispensing punishment. Now, the why of restorative practices in schools, there's two great books that we refer to in our trainings, and that's Restorative Circles in School and the Restorative Practices Handbook. And one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure students build those positive relationships at the elementary and middle school levels so that they can go on to become productive citizens. We see the school to prison pipeline, which means in school if a student is suspended and expelled multiple times, that student could drop out and that student could go to prison, or that student could go to a juvenile detention facility and might then later re-enter the prison system as an adult. And that's the cycle that we do not want to see for our students. And that's why restorative practices are so important. The California Ed Code also supports the need for restorative practices. California Ed Code 48900.5 states suspension shall be imposed only when other means of correction fail to bring about proper conduct. And other means of correction include, but are not limited to, the following. And then some of those are stated in the Ed Code, which include participation in a restorative justice program and a positive behavior support approach with tiered interventions that occur during the school day on campus, such as PBIS. So what are restorative practices? Restorative practices are a framework for building community and for responding to challenging behavior through authentic dialogue, coming to understanding, and making things right. And here's a great infographic that kind of talks about restorative practices. So some of the key points are building healthy relationships between educators and students, reducing, preventing, and improving harmful behavior, repair harm and restore positive relationships, resolve conflict and hold individual and groups accountable, and address and discuss the needs of the school and the community. And the core philosophy of restorative practices are that human beings are happier, more productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. So here's kind of a paradigm shift with restorative practices. So the adversarial role or question might be, what rule was broken? But the restorative approach is, well, who is harmed? Adversarial, who's to blame? Restorative is, okay, what harm resulted? Adversarial, what punishment does the offender deserve? Restorative is, well, what needs to be done to make things right? And one of the things that can be done is using restorative circles. And restorative circles are great for building relationships, addressing issues, taking action, and getting students acquainted with one another and their own selves. So our staffs had some training in restorative practices. We had a PBIS training on August 28th, and you can see some of our staff engaging in those restorative circles. And then this is just a candid shot showing that it was really a positive training. We also had restorative practices trainings. We had 2 sessions at the Strengthening Your Core Conference on October 9th, 2017. And right up front here, we see the team from Nicholas engaging in a restorative circle. So kind of looking at restorative circles in action, there's a lot of research to support that. And there's some YouTube videos that we've highlighted at our trainings that really just show that the circles are a powerful way to build restorative practice processes within a school. And it's a great way for staff and students to build relational capacity. So when we think about restorative practices, we want to think about integrating it into an MTSS approach. So again, remembering the MTSS is how we take PBIS and RTI, response to intervention, and we pair them together to support the whole child. So if we look at the bottom of our triangle here, when we think about prevention and intervention using restorative practices, we think about building community and relationships. That could be community building circles, effective questions, and effective statements. Then maintaining relationships. That could be done through impromptu conferences, circles for problem solving, or conflict resolution. And finally, repairing harm and restoring relationships. And that could be done at a formal restorative conference. So again, these restorative practices, just like PBS, are a tiered approach to supporting students. So what does that tiered approach look like? Okay, tier 1 with our restorative practices is that everyone participates 100%. So if we're thinking about restorative circles, where could that be done? That might be done at a classroom morning meeting. That might be done at a staff meeting. That might be done at a simple disagreement among students. It could be at the playground or in our junior high schools in the quad. It could be done in a classroom. They're informal and they can be quick. And there's a constant and a consistent format school-wide with language, especially in the language of apologies and how students might apologize to an adult, or how an adult might apologize to a student, because again, we're trying to repair that harm done to relationships. Tier 2, when we look at our restorative practices in those circles, are only needed by some, so that might be about 15%. That could include a specialized classroom meeting regarding a specific issue. It could be a smaller circle with affected individuals if there was an issue or something that took place. A disagreement among groups of friends, and that could be repeat kiddos, students that tend to have that same conflict within their small group. And it could be a specifically designed focus group like our student leadership. And then it does not have to be a problem-based action. Again, it can just be a practice of how do we resolve conflict in general, or presenting students with various scenarios. And then finally, we have our tier 3, which is only needed for a select few, which would be 5% or less of our students. And that would be for specific incidents involving possible administrative action. So fighting, bullying, cyberbullying, relational aggression, staff and student disagreements. It could involve parents, possibly both sets. It could involve the teacher and other staff members, district staff if circumstances deem it. And critical questions: what harm has been caused? What needs to be happened to make things right? And this next slide is kind of a tale of two schools, which shows you on one side, say there's a student, Carlos. He has a heated argument with his parents before leaving school, so he's running late. Let's see the difference between the restorative practice that restorative practices can make. So if you look over at the red, the zero tolerance education systems, Carlos could be greeted by metal detectors. His teacher might scold him in front of the class and give him a detention. A police officer might detain him and arrest him, another student who got in a fight. He could end up going to juvenile detention facility. Whereas on the other end, restorative practice-based systems, Carlos is welcomed to school by his teachers and administrators as he enters campus. Maybe Carlos says something in class, but his teacher waits until after class to speak to him and to learn more, and sets him up with a counselor. Student peer mediators support, and staff intervenes, and they sit down together to discuss the situation and de-escalate it. And then Carlos and the other students might agree to help clean the cafeteria during a free period. And then Carlos would meet with his counselor and parents after school to help restore the conflict at home. So that's a tale of two schools, and what we're moving to with our MTSS, that PBIS, and that multi-tiered system of support is a restorative approach. And if we look at restorative circles in school, the circles can be related to course content or interpersonal. They can help people take responsibility. They can allow quiet voices to be heard. We all know students who don't like to speak up, and we want to give them a voice. Circles can allow leaders to emerge. And someone will say, I don't know, can I pass? And it kind of helps students to be sure they have a response. The shape of the circle is important. We do use that circle shape because it's very inclusive. And with circles, we want our leaders to model appropriate participation. Circles can help people explore issues on a deeper level. Circles allow people to learn about each other and build relationships. And I think the biggest thing is that the circles really encourage problem solving. So we're going to have future PBIS trainings. Acacia, Beechwood, Laguna Road, and Nicholas attend the trainings at OCDE because they're at those Cadre 2, Cadre 3 levels. All of our other FSD sustainability schools attend in-house trainings coming up on December 12th, February 2nd, and May 15th. And we'll be delving deeper into restorative practices, our fidelity inventory, looking at our screener, and basically and our Swiss data, and seeing how we are coming together to really support our students. And I just also want to highlight we're able to send small sustainability teams to the trainings at OCDE as well. And the last slide here, I want to close with a positive note of one of our schools, Pacific Drive, just won a gold standard PBIS award, and we are incredibly proud of them and the practices that they have put into place. And we're looking forward to developing that with all of our schools and winning those recognitions. So thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.